Are you interested in angels, demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters? Are you curious about their origins, tales, and influence upon history and on the present day? If so, sit back, relax, and welcome to Southern Demonology, the podcast that explores all of this and more. Hello all. Welcome back to another episode of Southern Demonology. As always, I'm your host, JJ. This week, we are wrapping up a two-part interview with the amazing Christy, who began the last episode by sharing one of three stories. We also got onto multiple other side topics, mostly my fault, and we had a good old time. So I split that into two parts. Today, we're finishing that last piece up in which she shares her last two stories, which are really interesting. If you're curious about any part of the Salem Witch Trials, about Robert the Doll, about cursed objects, then this one is for you. I even make a back reference to the author, Anna Maria Manello, who I interviewed, who was truly phenomenal, has a new upcoming book coming out in Thanksgiving time, I believe. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed it. Talking to Christy is always such a delight. And after you listen to a single episode, I know that you will understand why. So without further ado, let's get back and hear the two other tales that Christy has to share.
This one comes courtesy of my stepdad's family, who are from Nowheresville, Wisconsin, and remain in Nowheresville, Wisconsin. And this is the one that I can prove because there are newspaper stories. In fact, I'm looking at one right now. And if you Google it, actually, you'll probably come up with like a Blogspot post or something like that. It's this blog post called it like something like the Christmas quilt. And the only newspaper clipping I could find that wasn't through a paywall, because there are lots of them in like Oshkosh and Waukegan or whatever county, whatever times from like different years, but I wasn't going to pay for them. So if somebody has access to newspapers.com or some kind of archive and wants to like dig those up, fabulous. That'd be great. This newspaper clipping is written by a Mr. Edward W. Bauman, entitled, "Man, it's real crazy, this crazy old quilt." So, in Nowheresville, Wisconsin, my stepdad's, I guess, like auntie or great aunt. Anyway, so they moved into this house in the 50s at some point, and there was some stuff already in there. And one of them was this quilt that was just, kept in a box as one would, right? Like no bigs. Mm-hmm. And they left it in there for a while. And then I guess Granny over here, she's going to have some company. And so she takes this quilt out and like lays it out on the bed. And, apparently it's a pretty quilt. I've never seen it. Up until very recently, nobody would admit to having even like have possession of it. So, take that for what it's worth. And so she takes it out, and I guess this woman's daughter or her granddaughter or both came to visit, and they're laying there, and this quilt and like they wake up in the middle of the night, and this quilt is so unbelievably hot, but it's heavy. It's like pressing down. And they're like, what? And it's trying to wriggle itself off the bed. They're holding it like physically with their hands, and it's like trying to like wriggle itself off the bed. So I'm looking at this bit right now on this article. It says, quote, "A little after midnight, Florence, whoever Florence is, was awakened by a jerking from the foot end of the old quilt. She was too frightened to yell, and she held on the quilt with both hands. It kept pulling, and she heard a voice say, 'Give me back my Christmas quilt.' And then she like let go, and it drug itself off the bed, like onto the floor. And then there are other people that have slept with it, like that will wake up and it will be hovering above them.
Oh
and
my
like different
God.
weird, yeah. and like different weird stuff like that. But my favorite story, my favorite one, was my stepdad's Uncle Tommy, who I met. He's a very nice man. I didn't get to talk to him about this, unfortunately. But so Uncle Tommy and his brother or cousin or something, again, like this is like mid to late 50s, early 60s ish time here we're talking about. And so they're home, and I guess they decided that they're going to be brave, and it's raining and stuff, and the kids are home alone. God, I don't know how old they were, like 12, 15, something like that. And so they're laying there with this quilt, and it's raining. They hear a knock on the door, and so they go to answer the door, and there's a farmer man standing there, which would be normal because they live outside of Oshkosh / Appleton / Berlin / Waukegan. If anybody's familiar with that area, I'm not, but I know those places.
That was a good accent.
Thank you. That's the only thing I can do. And God bless it, when I met his family for the first time, I couldn't understand a word they were saying. Where are you from? We're from Ashgash. Like Ashgash, Begash, Appleton. Sorry, what? You from where? That's cool. But anyway, so they go to answer the door, and there's a farmer standing there, which would be normal, except old bro over here isn't wet, even though it's raining. There are no wet footsteps leading up to the door, and he doesn't have a face.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what happened with that one. And they, I guess, like they closed the door and were understandably freaked out. And like there weren't any steps like leading away either. So it wasn't like somebody played a trick on them or anything like that. I mean, I guess they could have made it up, but whatever.
So is this related to the quilt in some way?
Yes. Yeah. The boys were, snuggling with the quilt, like watching TV or whatever it is that people did in the early mid 60s. They decided they're going to be like, apparently for a while it was like a joke to see who could sleep with it and like not get scared or like not have something happen to them. And like every single person was like, no, this, like I'm out, like nah. And so like these boys are like, oh no, we can handle it, because they're full of piss and vinegar and teenage boys.
Right.
And yeah, and so they're both chilling, and like, yeah, and so then that happens, and they're like, Urgh! And I don't know if somebody else was there, if like one of them was sleeping or what, or if maybe it was a different time. But I do know that at least once, like the quilt, like would, because it would always wriggle itself down like the foot of the bed, like off of the bed, and like go down that way, versus like off to the side or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It would like work its way up underneath furniture, like so you couldn't get it back out. Like it would like go up underneath the dresser or something. And so they're like, all right, that's cute. So we're going to put this back in the box and put it back in the attic and never speak of this again. And up until recently, I don't know, probably time is meaningless. And so let me think, probably about, I don't know, until I was 20 or 21 or so, like my stepdad maintained that like no one knew where, like who had it. Like no one would admit to having it. But I actually messaged him earlier and I asked, Aunt Florence, who actually was mentioned in that article, the person that I mentioned. Apparently, Aunt Florence, stepdad said Aunt Florence had it up to a few years ago. I'm sure one of her kids have it stashed in a closet, but I don't know who. And so somebody somewhere knows where it is, but apparently they don't like to play with it anymore. But
I was certainly like, understand why.
I'll play with it. I ain't scared. Let's go. I'm not scared at all.
Oh, dear Lord. That actually reminds me, like I interviewed Anna Maria Manello, who is a horror anthology writer, and she's written a book called Haunted Heirlooms, all about antique furniture and objects and the misery that they have inflicted upon their owners. And I think that would fit right into that book perfectly. Holy goodness gracious.
Like Robert the Doll. Have you heard of Robert the Doll?
I have. But why don't you elucidate for those who may not?
Okay. So Robert the Doll, and I know I'm forgetting loads of details here, so forgive me. This family like got this little boy like a doll, and I want to say they lived in Florida. But anyway, so he was playing with this doll, and like weird started happening. Weird stuff started happening, and things would get broken and stuff like that. And like the parents would get angry with the child? And he's like, no, like Robert did it. And they're like, okay, yeah, whatever. And I want to say he ended up with like bruises or like pinch marks or something, like, because I feel like he was an only child, and and he'd be crying and whatever, and like come down to his mama and daddy, and he's like, yeah, like Robert did it, and they're like, all right, kid with a little bit of an overactive imagination, it's a doll. And I know he moved away, and I think that like Robert was like kept in the attic, and I recall at some point like they kept him so he could look out the window. But after the parents died, I believe that the son moved back into the home and like still had this like weird connection with this doll. And after he died, the doll was given to a museum of some kind, like a local museum. And anybody that goes in and makes fun of it, because like the thing's ancient now, it's, like 100 years old, give or take, whatever. And like people that go in, and if they say something like derogatory about Robert the doll, then like they'll go home and like bad shit happens to them. And it will keep happening until they write an apology.
Isn't this the doll that's dressed up in like a little sailor's outfit?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the creepiest bloody looking thing I have ever laid eyes on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like even without like the aging to it, like just by itself, it's like, oh, all right, that's a creepy thing that exists.
exactly.
There's some state park in the Southwest somewhere, probably like a very specific area of the state park. And like obviously you're not supposed to take the the fossilized wood, petrified wood, or like any rocks or whatever from like the area, but people
Hmm.
do. The rangers have said like they get packages like almost every day of people that have taken something from this specific area, and like they're like, yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal, and then like I came home and like my entire life fell apart, whatever, all these things like randomly started happening to me. So I'm really sorry, please have the thing back and go put it back where it lives, because like having this is not good for my health, essentially. I mean, and so it's like one of those things of like, correlation and causation and superstition and possibility and plausibility. But the Robert the doll, especially like that one, because and again, like I'm sure I know other people know more about it than I'm recalling at the moment, but like it seems like such a very niche thing to go see. And I feel like it only happens if you like talk mess like in front of the doll itself, like not if you're anywhere else. Like if he hears you, then that's when like something bad happens. And so I always thought that was like very interesting. Like once again, like agnostic about most things. Well, almost everything really. Like I can't tell you what I think is happening because I don't know. But I always thought that was very interesting, like specifically.
Yeah, no, there is such a fantastically rich repertoire of creepy tales that involve Japanese ningyo or dolls. No, and plus, I mean, henna dolls have such a rich history to them. But yeah, those things freak me out. I will never mess with a doll ever.
Yeah, which is funny because like I'm not like when I was growing up, like being creeped out like by porcelain dolls was a big thing. Clowns weren't the big thing yet, and like they never really creeped me out because like they're just a doll. But there's something like you're right. There's something uncanny about certain pieces of art or artifacts or whatever that you're like, all right, this isn't just creepy because it might be foreign to me. Like there's something like that's like tickling my lizard brain, and I don't really like it that much.
Exactly. All right. So, how about story number 3?
So number three actually piggybacks off of my stepdad's family. They're real big into genealogy, and my stepdad's sister, her work gives her free access to like basically every genealogy research website database that there is. And so she's been able to do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of research. Let's step back for a second. So I'm into like weird little like occulty type things and whatever. And there's this website that I like that just like sells like little knickknacks and whatever. And it's called like Memento Mori, or like Memento Mori items or goods or something like that. And I'm not getting any kind of sponsorship. So like if somebody wants to sling something my way, but that said, um, so they have this line that's sort of like an homage to the folks who were murdered during the Salem Witch Trials. And I collect enamel pins, like lapel pins that you stick on, like not writing pins. And there were two that I liked. And one of them says, "Oh, nasty slut." And then the other one is, I told you earlier, "I truly hope that someone uses this unironically at me before I die, because that will make my life." And the other one is, "Oh, rampant hag." And I love that. I'm up in Wisconsin for the first time last summer. My mom passed away, and they had her ashes up there, and my stepsister's mom passed away earlier that year, and it just so happened that I was going to make the memorial service for her mom. So anyway, so we're all chit-chatting, whatever, because I haven't seen any of them since I was probably about 14. So they're talking to me, and they're telling me, my stepdad's sister is telling me that, she did all this genealogy and this, that, and the other, and turns out they're related to someone from the Salem Witch Trials. And I said, "Really?" And it just so turned out that I had my nasty slut pin on my bag at that point in time, which is what was said to Sarah Good, who was one of the first 3 or 4 people who were hanged during the Salem Witch Trials. And I was like, "Oh, you're joking me." And they're like, "No." And I was like, "Oh, wow." And they did not think it was nearly as funny as I did that I had the pin, or I guess what it said. Whatever. Not like they knew her. Like 400 years. Anyway.
Too soon?
Yeah, like this. Yeah, right? I'm like, "You don't know who this woman is." Sarah Good, like that was, yeah, like I did a little bit of research into it. I think that she's also featured as a character in The Crucible, but I could be wrong because I don't even know if I read that in high school.
I did, but that would have been back in 10th grade, which is effectively infinity plus 20, 30 years, whatever that is.
Right after the Big Bang, right? Like time is meaningless. Like, I have what happened last week, and then everything else is like, yeah, the other day. So Sarah Good, like her heel husband, like testified against her. They got her like 4 or 5 or 6-year-old daughter to testify against her. This is awful stuff. And like the nasty slut part came because these children or whatever that were, that were giving testimony that were oh so afflicted, whatever, like Sarah Good wasn't even there. And they said that they were having visions that she had like appeared in the courtroom or whatever, and somebody else like took a stick and hit the air with it, basically. And this chick was like, "Oh, like you hit her, like, yeah, like good job," or whatever. But basically she was like, "Oh, like there she is, and she's naked, and like she's naked and showing her legs and her breasts, and oh, you nasty slut." Like, and I was like, all right. But the best part of it is that they didn't hang her right away because girlfriend was knocked up with her second child, which she had in prison, which then died. Because, prison sucks now, but apparently obviously back then it sucked a lot, or sucked more, or sucked in different ways, really. Because let's not talk about the prison industrial complex, because I'll jump on that. But yeah, and so anyway, so Sarah's being interrogated this whole time, and like, "Who do you serve?" And she was like, "I serve God." And they're like, "Who do you employ to do these things?" And she's like, "Nobody that I know of." And it's like, "Well, why are you hurting the kid?" And she's like, "I'm not." And so anyway, so they're up on the gallows, Sarah and these 3 other women. And they're up on the gallows, and this judge, his name was Noyes, Noyes. So I don't know that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's how I'm saying it. So he's standing there and he's like, right? Like, somebody please correct me. For real, that wasn't like a challenge. Or it is a challenge, whatever makes you happy, I guess. But so homie's standing there and he's reading these chicks the riot act. Like, they're there on the gallows. Like, like, what else are you gonna do? And he keeps trying to get him to confess, and Sarah's like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, like, admit you did it and whatever." And the few books that I did read, my little excerpts out of Control F is the Best, had mentioned that these authors, these historians had mentioned that they think that Sarah's obstinance to the judge is like what probably guaranteed that she was going to hang. But anyway, So she's up there with these other women, and everybody else is quiet. And she's just like, nah, dude, didn't do it. Don't know what you're talking about. And so when the judges declared her guilty, apparently Sarah Good looked at Judge Noyes, and this is a quote. This is the part where you can't prove me right or wrong because accounts differ. So there you go. But I like this story, so I'm saying it's right. Apparently she yelled to him, quote, I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink. And so then, hang her. She's dead. And then, like, I don't know, like 15 years later or something, Noyes dies. And I did find an actual document saying that he likely died of something like a brain hemorrhage. But the thing is if you have some kind of an aneurysm or anything like that, then that can lead to, your blood leaking out of your orifices. But also, it's not uncommon for you to aspirate blood, depending on how long the body has been dead as it goes through the states of rigor. And so, if someone found him, however many hours after he died, and there was blood on his mouth or on his face, like people thought that's part of where like the vampire myth comes from, is like bodies aspirating blood. And so like, oh, like they're drinking blood, right? But yeah, the fact that he may or may not have choked on his own blood to death, I kind of like, and I don't care if it's real or not, because I want to believe, because that's pretty badass.
That would be accurate. And plus he would thoroughly deserve that.
Right? I mean, like, one of my other favorites was I think there's only one man that was actually murdered, and he was pressed to death. Like they put something, like, I don't know, like a piece of wood like down the length of your body essentially, and just like keep putting heavy stuff on it over the course of like days.
Ooh.
Like it is, I mean, they can do it as they can take as little or as long as they want to. And obviously, right, it gets to the point where you can't expand your lungs anymore and you die. And the only thing that this man would say over days was more weight. Like, what a great you, more weight. But
dear Lord,
like, that's all you got, like more weight, guys. And I was like, and they never got a confession out of him. Never, not one single thing. But yeah, no, I especially liked that bit with Sarah Good, and like my stepdad has kind of like insinuated that like maybe his gran practiced some tarot, or like there's like a crystal ball around her house somewhere in this very tiny very Lutheran town, very Midwestern nice Lutheran area. And so I'm like, all right, like maybe all got something going on here. I don't know why I missed the boat on all the cool stuff, but again, possibilities and probabilities, and anecdotes aren't evidence, and yada yada yada. But I like, and the human brain enjoys a pattern. But yeah, I just like all these things taken together. I'm like, if nothing else, aren't they cool stories?
At the end of the day, we crave entertainment, and whether they're true or not, if they elicit a chill down the spine or, a hearty chuckle, then really what more can you ask for?
Right? I mean, better and easier than trying to find, I don't know. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. That's it. Like, for a while, I wanted to do folklore instead of like straight up archaeology, just because I think stories are so fascinating, and like these motifs, and how, from the outside looking in, like it's so easy to find these different motifs. But even if one is aware of a motif, like from inside the tradition, the same thing can mean so many different things, even in the same time period, in the same cultural context. And like, I just think that's fascinating.
It absolutely is. Just so long as you don't study Joseph Campbell. Friends don't let friends study Joseph Campbell.
And you keep saying that, and I have not yet. I kept meaning to, and I deleted the books off of my Kindle because of you. So
well,
now,
you have warmed the very cockles of my heart then.
Yeah, man, like it's just like archetypes are a thing, and like all of the dying and rising god, and like all of these things. But just like, aren't stories fun?
Well, you have thoroughly entertained me. I know you have entertained everyone who bothers to listen, and I cannot thank you enough for
Oh,
spending
no.
this Halloween regaling us with some of the best tales I could have asked for.
Yeah, no, this was a pleasure. I'm really flattered and honored to have been on again. I'm hoping that maybe somebody somewhere gets a little chuckle out of these stories or a little bit of entertainment. If you're gonna play with Ouija boards, then I guess go for it. Something about salt, I don't know. I haven't seen Supernatural in a while. JJ, you are awesome, and thanks so much for having me again. And I can't wait to hear more stories.
Thank you for listening to Southern Demonology. Find us online at southerndemonology.com, where you can find all of our social and podcasting links. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate this podcast and leave any encouraging feedbacks that you may have. As always, I am JJ, and it has been a pleasure getting to talk to you today.